I am Grace, 32 years old, and I have spent my entire life being the daughter my parents forgot to love. Last month, I sent my family the most important invitation of my career. My father's response? He laughed and called me just a lowly teacher. My sister said she was too busy because she had plans for an important dinner. My mother did not even bother to type a reply. She simply liked my sister's message and moved on. I stared at my phone for a long time that night, then I typed back 4 words. That is fine. No worries. But what they did not know, what none of them could have predicted, was that 48 hours later, my father would be sitting in a crowded 5-star restaurant, scrolling through his phone, when his face would turn white as a sheet. Because on that screen, in front of millions of viewers on national television, was me. Before I continue, if this story speaks to you, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with it. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? I would love to know who is listening to my story today. Now let me take you back 3 weeks before that night, to the day a single envelope changed everything. The autumn sun was setting behind Lincoln Middle School when I finished wiping down the last whiteboard. Room 214 had been my second home for 8 years now. The thank you cards from students covered an entire wall, handwritten notes in crayon, marker, and sometimes shaky pencil from kids who had never written a letter before they met me. I was collecting my bag when my phone buzzed. It was my mother, Eleanor. Grace, honey, just wanted to let you know Madison closed her merger today. The big one, the international acquisition. I smiled genuinely. That is wonderful, Mom. Tell her I said congratulations. We are planning a dinner this weekend to celebrate. Eleanor continued, her voice practically glowing through the speaker. Your father is so proud. He has already called everyone. That sounds nice, I said. But before I could finish my thought, there was shuffling on her end. Actually, sweetie, I need to call Madison back. She is waiting. We will talk later, okay? The dial tone cut me off before I could even mention my own news. I stared at the phone as the screen faded to black. On my desk sat an unopened envelope made of thick cream paper with an official seal from the Department of Education. I had been carrying it in my bag for 2 days, waiting for the right moment to share the news. I picked it up again, running my thumb across the embossed letters, National Teacher of the Year Selection Committee. Inside was an invitation that most educators never receive in their entire careers. I was one of 4 finalists in the country. The ceremony would be in Washington, D.C., and the Secretary of Education would present the award personally, while national news networks broadcast it live. I looked at the thank you cards on my wall. At least someone thought I mattered. This was not the first time I had been cut off or pushed aside. 3 years ago, at my master's graduation, Arthur and Eleanor arrived 2 hours late. Traffic, they said. But the next morning, I overheard my mother on the phone bragging to an aunt about how they made it just in time for Madison's corporate gala. They had left my ceremony early and never even told me. 2 years ago, on my 30th birthday, no one called. Not Arthur, not Eleanor, not Madison. 3 days later, my mother texted, "Oh, honey, was your birthday last week?" Time flies. Let us do lunch soon. We never did. Last Christmas, when Madison announced her promotion to senior partner at her investment firm, my father opened a bottle of his special occasion wine, the one he had been saving for 15 years. When I mentioned that my students had raised enough money to buy new books for the school library, he just nodded absently and asked Madison about her annual bonus. I had learned to stop expecting anything from them. But this letter was different. It said, my nomination had been submitted by a distinguished educator whose identity would remain confidential. Someone believed in me enough to put my name forward for the highest honor in American education. My heart beat faster. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe if they saw the official invitation, the government seal, and the words Washington, D.C., they would finally understand. I opened our family group chat and started typing. I rewrote that message 11 times. The first draft was too long, explaining how rare the award was. I deleted it, feeling too desperate. The second was too short. By draft 11, I stripped it down to the essentials. Hi, everyone. I have some news. I have been selected as a finalist for the National Teacher of the Year Award. The ceremony is October 15th in Washington, D.C. It would mean a lot to me if you could be there. I attached the PDF with the gold seal and the formal language about honoring America's finest educators. My thumb hovered over the send button for a full minute. What if they said no? What if they laughed? But what if, just this once, they actually showed up? I pressed send. Then I waited. I made dinner and checked my phone. I graded papers and checked my phone. By midnight, the message showed it had been read by all three of them. No response. I fell asleep with my phone on my pillow. At 7:42 the next morning, I woke to a notification. 3 gray dots appeared under my father's name. He was typing. Finally, I thought, after all these years. The dots disappeared, then reappeared. His message was only 11 words. Just a lowly teacher's award, am not flying to Washington for that nonsense. I read it 3 times, and each time the words cut deeper. Just a lowly teacher. Before I could even process the pain, Madison's response appeared. Sorry, Mark and I have dinner plans that night. Cannot cancel. It is important. You understand, right? She actually added a smiley face. I watched the screen, waiting for my mother to say something, to defend me, to suggest they reschedule, to acknowledge that her daughter had achieved something extraordinary. Instead, a small notification appeared. Eleanor Sterling liked Madison's message. That was it. No words, no congratulations, just a thumbs up on my sister's rejection of me. My chest tightened with that familiar ache I had carried since I was 12 years old, watching my father hang Madison's achievements on the fridge while mine went straight into a drawer. I set my phone down, then picked it up again. What do you say to people who make it so clear that you do not matter? I typed 4 words. That is fine. No worries. I did not cry. I had stopped crying about my family years ago. Instead, I felt a hard resolve settle into my chest. I would go to Washington alone. I would sit in that audience by myself, and whether I won or lost, I would know that I had earned my place there. My phone buzzed one last time. It was another message from Madison. By the way, you should really think about a career change. Teaching is not going anywhere. Just trying to help. I turned off my phone and stared at my master's degree on the wall. I graduated summa cum laude after 3 years of night classes while teaching full-time, and my father had missed that graduation too. I was done waiting for their approval, but the truth has a way of finding people when they least expect it. The blue light from my phone was the only thing illuminating my small apartment at 7:42 a.m. when the notification that would change my life forever finally arrived. My heart was hammering against my ribs so loudly I could hear it in my ears. 3 gray dots appeared under my father Arthur's name. He was typing. I held my breath, hoping that for once, the Department of Education seal and the gold embossed letters on the invitation I had messaged him would be enough to earn his respect. The dots disappeared, then reappeared, and finally a message popped up. It was exactly 11 words long, just a lowly teacher's award. I'm not flying to Washington for that nonsense. The words just a lowly teacher cut through me like a physical blade. I read it 3 times, each time feeling the air leave my lungs. Before I could even begin to process the sting of his dismissal, my sister Madison's response appeared right underneath. Sorry, she wrote. Mark and I have dinner plans that night. Can't cancel. It's important. You understand, right? She actually added a smiley face emoji at the end, as if her social calendar were a legitimate reason to miss the highest honor in my professional life. I watched the screen, waiting for my mother, Eleanor, to say something, to defend me. I waited for her to acknowledge that her daughter had been named one of only 4 finalists in the entire country. Instead, a small notification appeared. Eleanor Sterling liked Madison's message. That was it. No words of congratulations. No, we are so proud of you, honey. Just a digital thumbs up on my sister's rejection of me. Before I continue and tell you about the secret my family was about to discover the hard way, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you believe that every profession deserves respect. Also, drop a comment below. Have you ever had a moment where you realized your family valued money or status over your actual worth? I want to read your stories because I know I am not alone in this. Now let us look at the history that led to this moment. This familiar ache in my chest had been there since I was 12 years old, watching Arthur hang Madison's report cards on the fridge while mine went straight into a junk drawer. My family had always measured success in seven-figure salaries and pharmaceutical lawsuits, while I was busy wiping down whiteboards in room 214. 3 years ago, at my master's graduation, a degree I earned by taking night classes for 3 years while teaching full-time, my parents arrived 2 hours late, claiming traffic was the issue. The next morning, I overheard Eleanor on the phone bragging about how they made it just in time for Madison's corporate dinner because she looked stunning accepting an award there. They had left my ceremony early and never even told me. That is why I had spent a week carrying this invitation everywhere. In my bag, on my nightstand, in my heart. I had read the words so many times the creases were wearing thin. Dear Miss Sterling, we are honored to inform you that you have been selected as a finalist for the National Teacher of the Year Award. My nomination had been submitted by a distinguished educator whose identity was confidential, someone who believed in me enough to put my name forward for the highest honor in American education. I had rewritten the message to my family group chat 11 times. Draft 1 was too long and desperate. Draft 2 was too short and apologetic. By draft 11, I had stripped it down to the essentials, hoping that the government seal and the mention of the Secretary of Education would finally make them see me. But they did not see me. They only saw a $52,000 a year salary and a classroom full of other people's children. Madison even sent another text after her rejection, saying, "By the way, you should really think about a career change. Teaching isn't going anywhere, just trying to help." I set my phone down and looked at my master's degree on the wall, the one I had graduated summa cum laude for while they were busy celebrating Madison's bonus. I didn't cry. I had stopped crying about them years ago. Instead, a hard resolve settled into my chest. I would go to Washington alone. I would sit in that audience by myself, and whether I won or lost, I would know that I had earned my place there. Just as I was about to turn off my phone, it rang. The caller ID said Grandma Martha. I answered instantly, and her voice was warm and steady, everything my parents' voices were not. She told me she had heard about the nomination and asked if I had told my parents. My silence was all the answer she needed. "Emily, listen to me," she said. "Did you read that nomination letter carefully?" She mentioned that the nominator had transformed 3 failing schools and was a legend in education circles. When I asked how she knew what the letter said, she simply told me she had old friends on the committee and that she would be at the ceremony no matter what. Grandma Martha, a retired principal of 35 years, told me not to worry about my parents. "The truth has a way of finding people sometimes when they least expect it," she whispered. I didn't know then what she meant, but the plan was already in motion. 2 days before my flight, Eleanor called, insisting I come to Sunday dinner because Arthur wanted the whole family together. I arrived to find the table set with the good china and a crystal decanter of wine. My father raised his glass, not to me, but to Madison, who had just made partner at her firm, becoming the youngest partner in their history. As they bragged about her 7-figure salary and mocked my apartment as sad and quaint, I sat there in silence, holding the secret of the first-class ticket the Department of Education had sent me. I watched Madison smirk and ask if I was flying economy to my little ceremony. I looked her in the eye and calmly told her that the government was covering all my expenses. First class. The table went dead quiet. They had no idea that while they were laughing at my lowly teacher's award, CNN was already emailing me for a national interview. Some truths are better discovered than delivered, and my family was about to receive a lesson they would never forget. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 6 o'clock for the Sunday dinner my mother had insisted upon. The colonial brick exterior looked the same as always, but inside, the atmosphere was thick with a celebration I knew was not for me. The dining room table was draped in a white linen cloth and set with the fine china, the gold-rimmed set they reserved only for moments that truly mattered to them. My father, Harrison, was already pouring wine into a crystal decanter, while my sister, Madison, sat at the head of the table looking radiant in a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She offered me a brief, condescending air kiss as I sat down. Harrison raised his glass before the first course was even served. "I would like to propose a toast to Madison," he announced, his voice booming with pride. "The youngest senior partner in the history of her firm. This is what real success looks like." Before I described the moment, my father turned his gaze toward me and laughed at my life's work. "Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you have ever been the invisible child in your family. If you are watching right now, please drop a comment letting me know where you are from and what time it is there. I truly want to know who is standing with me today." Have you ever felt like your achievements were invisible because they did not come with a massive paycheck? Share your story below and let us get back to that dinner table. Madison smoothed her blouse and smiled as Evelyn beamed at her. "See, Chloe," my mother said, looking at me with a pointed expression, "that is what hard work and ambition get you. Real results." Harrison leaned forward, a competitive glint in his eyes. "Go on, Madison. Tell your sister what your new base salary is." Madison gave a practiced, humble shrug. "Let us just say it is a substantial 7 figures, Dad. Including the performance bonuses, it is around 1.8 million. The table fell silent for a moment, the weight of that number hanging in the air like a trophy. My father let out a triumphant laugh and clapped his hands. 1.8 million. My daughter is a millionaire before 40. Then the focus shifted. The warmth in Harrison's eyes cooled as he looked at me. "So, Chloe, what is new in your world? Still dealing with those? What are they? Middle schoolers?" "7th and 8th grade," I replied calmly, though my stomach was in knots. He nodded slowly, swirling his wine. "Right. And that little teacher appreciation thing you mentioned for Tuesday? It is the National Teacher of the Year ceremony, Dad," I reminded him. He waved his hand dismissively. "Right. Cute. A little certificate for the wall." Madison tilted her head, that familiar smirk playing on her lips. "So I have to ask, what does a teacher actually pull in these days? If you do not mind me being curious." "Around 49,000 a year," I said, keeping my voice level. Madison glanced at her husband, Mark, and struggled to suppress a laugh. "Honey," she whispered loudly, "that is literally less than my quarterly clothing allowance." Harrison shook his head gravely. "You see, Chloe, this is exactly what I have been telling you for a decade. Teaching has no future and zero growth potential. You are a smart woman. You could have been a corporate executive or a lawyer like your sister. Instead, you are stuck in a dusty classroom with other people's children." "I love my students," I said, my grip tightening on my napkin. Evelyn leaned forward, looking genuinely confused. "But love does not pay the bills, sweetheart," Harrison added, "and it certainly does not buy a decent place to live. That apartment of yours," Madison interrupted with a shrug. "It is pathetic, Chloe. Honestly, it is sad. It looks like a dormitory for someone who gave up." I set my fork down slowly and looked at each of them. "I am sorry my life does not meet your financial standards, but my bills are paid and my work has purpose." The tension was broken, unexpectedly, by Mark, who cleared his throat and looked at me with a small, sincere nod. "For what it is worth, I think what you do is incredible," he said quietly. My 6th grade teacher was the reason I stayed in school. Our eyes met for a second before Madison shot him a sharp, silencing glare. I pushed through the rest of the meal, listening to them discuss the elite party they were throwing for Madison at a rooftop lounge next month. They did not ask about my flight or my speech. They did not even ask if I was nervous. As I stood up to leave, Madison smirked one last time. "Let me guess, you are flying economy to your little trophy presentation? Teacher salary and all." I paused at the doorway and turned back, my voice calm and pleasant. "Actually, the Department of Education is covering every single expense," I said. "I am flying first class, and a private car is picking me up." The table went completely silent. Even Harrison's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "First class? For a teacher award?" he muttered. "It is a national honor, Dad," I replied. "It is broadcast live on national television, and the Secretary of Education presents it personally. But I suppose you would not know that, since you did not bother to read the invitation I sent you." I did not wait for a response. I walked out into the cool night air, leaving them sitting in their expensive dining room, surrounded by their fine china and their 7-figure egos. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed with an email. It was from a producer at CNN, asking for an exclusive interview before the ceremony. My family thought I was going to a small school assembly. They had no idea the whole country was about to see the lowly teacher they had spent 30 years looking down upon. Some truths are better discovered on a screen than explained at a dinner table. I drove home from that dinner in total silence. No radio, no podcast, just the steady hum of the engine and the echo of my father's fork hitting his plate when I mentioned flying first class. Harrison's face had gone pale, not out of pride, but out of sheer confusion that a lowly teacher could be treated like royalty by the United States government. When I finally reached my apartment, a one-bedroom walk-up in Boston that Harrison once called depressing and Madison described as quaint in a sad way, I sat on my bed and stared at my master's degree on the wall. I had graduated summa cum laude after 3 years of night classes while teaching full-time, and my father had missed that graduation too. I realized then that I was done waiting for their approval, but the universe was already preparing a response they never saw coming. My phone rang, breaking the heavy silence. I almost ignored it, but the caller ID said Grandma Beatrice. I answered instantly because her voice was warm, steady, and everything my parents' voices were not. "Grace, sweetheart," she said, and I could hear the smile in her tone. "I heard about the nomination." I paused, my heart racing. "How did you know?" "Word travels in education circles," she replied. "Did you tell your parents?" The silence on my end was all the answer she needed. She understood. She always did. "Grace, listen to me," she continued, her voice turning serious. "Did you read the nomination letter carefully? Before I tell you the secret my grandmother was holding and the legendary power she carried in the world of education, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you have ever had one person who believed in you when no one else would. Also, let me know in the comments, who was that person for you? Was it a grandparent, a teacher, or a friend? I want to read your stories because those are the people who truly matter. Now let us get back to the phone call that changed my entire perspective on who I am. I told Beatrice that the letter said the nominator wished to remain anonymous, but it mentioned this person had nominated 6 teachers over 30 years. My breath caught as the realization hit me. How do you know what the letter says, Grandma? Beatrice had been a principal for 35 years before retiring. She had transformed 3 failing schools into models of excellence, and in education circles, her name carried a weight I had never fully understood as a child. "Let us just say I have old friends on the committee," she whispered. "Grace, I will be at the ceremony." I would not miss it for anything. I tried to tell her she did not have to fly all the way to Washington, D.C., but her tone left no room for argument. "I will be there," she said firmly. "And Grace, do not worry about your parents. The truth has a way of finding people sometimes when they least expect it." I asked her what she meant, but she just told me to focus on my speech and that she would see me in the Capitol. When the call ended, my heart was racing. I looked at the thank you cards on my wall from my students and realized that Beatrice saw what Harrison and Evelyn were too blind to notice. She knew my value was not in a 7-figure salary, but in the lives of the children I fought for every single day. The next morning, the reality of the situation began to set in. As I was locking up my classroom at Lincoln Middle School, my principal, Dr. Walker, stopped me. He told me the entire school was rooting for me and that they were planning a watch party in the cafeteria. He asked if I knew who nominated me, and when I told him it was anonymous, he lowered his voice. "Emily, the person who put your name forward, is a legend. She has only nominated 6 teachers in her entire career, and all 6 of them won the national title." He let that sink in. "Whoever nominated you did not do it lightly. They saw something extraordinary in you." The flight to Reagan National was surreal. First class meant a flight attendant who called me Miss Sterling, like I was someone important. I was not used to being treated like I mattered. A black car waited at the arrivals gate, and the driver drove me to the Willard Intercontinental, a hotel I had only ever seen in movies. The lobby gleamed with crystal chandeliers and marble floors, and the staff greeted me by name, telling me my suite was ready. Not a room, but a suite. I met the other 3 finalists that evening, teachers from across the country who had spent their careers being underestimated just like me. We laughed, the relieved laughter of people who were finally being seen. When I scanned the program for the ceremony the next morning, my eyes stopped at a specific line. Under the list of attendees, it read, Guest of Honor, Beatrice Sterling. My grandmother was not just coming to support me, she was being honored herself. I found her in the hotel lobby later that morning, sitting in a wingback chair by the window. At 84, she still carried herself with the commanding respect of the principal she once was. She rose and hugged me fiercely, whispering, "My brilliant, beautiful girl." I pulled back and asked her why she was the guest of honor. She smiled the smile of someone holding a wonderful secret. "I have been watching your career since the day you stepped into your first classroom," she said. "Every student you saved, every parent who told me how you stayed late to help their child, I collected evidence." She squeezed my hands and told me she had wanted to nominate me 6 years ago, but she waited because I had not found my voice yet. But she knew I was ready now. Beatrice leaned closer and told me that during the ceremony, a former student would speak about my impact. "I arranged for one of yours to be here," she said, her eyes sparkling. "And don't worry about Harrison and Evelyn. They will see the broadcast. The whole country will. And when they do, they will finally understand what they have been too blind to notice." She kissed my forehead and told me to go practice my speech. While I was preparing in Washington, 300 miles away in Boston, my family was having lunch, completely unaware that the lowly teacher they mocked was about to become the most famous educator in the country. Some truths are indeed better discovered than delivered, and the dirt was about to start falling on the narrative they had built against me. Monday morning arrived with a quiet, golden light filtering through the windows of my one-bedroom apartment, the place my sister Madison once described as quaint in a sad way. I stood by the door with one modest suitcase, carefully packed with my best professional dress and the speech I had rewritten 40 times. As I was locking up my classroom at Jefferson Middle School for the final time before my trip, my principal, Dr. James Walker, called me. His voice carried a warmth I had come to rely on over the years, telling me that the entire school was rooting for me and planning a watch party in the cafeteria. He mentioned that Jefferson Middle School had never had a National Teacher of the Year finalist before, and that this moment was historic. When I told him the nomination was anonymous, he dropped his voice and told me that the person who put my name forward was a legend in our field, who had only nominated 6 teachers in 30 years, and all 6 had won. Before I describe the surreal experience of being treated like a person of importance by the United States government, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you believe that teachers deserve more than just a certificate on a wall. If you are watching right now, please drop a comment below letting me know where you are watching from and what time it is there. I truly want to know who is standing with me today. Have you ever had a moment where the world finally saw your value, even when your own family refused to? Share your story below, and let us get back to that flight to Washington. The flight to Reagan National was unlike anything I had ever experienced. In my family, first class was a status symbol reserved for Madison's corporate victories and Harrison's business deals, while I was always expected to fly economy. But the Department of Education had covered every expense, and first class meant champagne before takeoff, and a flight attendant who called me Miss Carter like I was someone important. I was not used to being treated like I mattered. As I sat in a seat that reclined fully, I thought about the Sunday dinner just 48 hours prior, where Madison had smirked and mocked my little ceremony. She had no idea that while she was busy bragging about her 7-figure salary, I was being whisked away to the Capitol as a guest of the state. Upon arrival, a black car waited for me with a driver holding a sign with my name. He took my bag, opened my door, and drove me to the Willard Intercontinental, a hotel I had only ever seen in movies about power brokers and presidents. The lobby gleamed with crystal chandeliers and marble floors, and the staff in crisp uniforms greeted me by name. They informed me that my suite was ready, not a room, but a suite. Stepping into that luxurious space, I realized the staggering contrast between this reception and the way my family viewed my career. To my father, I was stuck in a classroom with other people's children, but to the Department of Education, I was one of the finest educators in America. That evening, I attended a reception where I met the other three finalists: Michael Torres, Priya Sharma, and David Okonkwo. We were all nervous and slightly overwhelmed by the room full of education officials and policymakers. Michael joked that his principal had to convince him the nomination letter wasn't a scam, and we shared the relieved laughter of people who had spent their careers being underestimated. We were no longer lowly teachers in that room. We were the guests of honor. The most shocking moment came when someone handed me the official program for the next day's ceremony. I scanned the list of committee members and university presidents, and then my eyes stopped at a specific line. Guest of honor, Martha Reynolds. My grandmother was not just coming to support me, she was being honored herself. I found her the next morning in the hotel lobby, sitting in a wingback chair by the window, looking as straight-backed and sharp-eyed as she did when she was a principal. She rose to embrace me, whispering that I was her brilliant, beautiful girl. When I asked why she was the guest of honor, she smiled the smile of someone holding a wonderful secret. She confessed that she had been watching my career since my first day in the classroom and had been collecting evidence of every student I saved and every parent I helped. She revealed that she was the one who had nominated the 6 winners over the last 30 years, and she had waited until I found my voice to nominate me. She told me that a former student would speak about me at the ceremony and warned me not to worry about my parents. They would see the broadcast, she said, and finally understand what they had been too blind to notice. While I was being treated with such profound respect in Washington, my family back in Philadelphia was completely clueless. They were likely planning Madison's next promotion party, unaware that the national media was already preparing to broadcast my face to millions. My father thought I was at a little conference with finger sandwiches, and my sister thought I was winning a participation trophy. They had no idea that I was standing in the Kennedy Center, about to walk out into the light and be recognized by the entire country. The contrast was perfect. My family gave me a thumbs up on a rejection message, while the nation was preparing for a standing ovation. The grand ballroom of the Kennedy Center took my breath away. 2,000 people were seated under crystal chandeliers that cast a golden light across a sea of white draped tables. American flags flanked a stage that seemed to stretch forever, and cameras were positioned at every angle to broadcast this moment to the entire country. A production assistant touched my elbow and whispered that I would enter from stage left when my name was called. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Through a gap in the curtain, I spotted Grandma Beatrice in the front row, seated directly behind a placard that read, Guest of Honor. She wore her best navy suit and the pearl earrings Grandpa had given her 50 years ago, her eyes already glistening with pride. I felt my phone buzz in my clutch, a text from Beatrice. She wrote that she was so proud and that my parents would soon see what she had always known. The whole country was about to meet the Chloe she loved. As the Secretary of Education approached the podium, I realized this was not the conference room with finger sandwiches and a PowerPoint presentation my father had imagined. This was a stage for the best of what education can be. The secretary spoke about teachers who go beyond the curriculum, who see potential where others see problems, and who change lives one student at a time. I closed my eyes and breathed, knowing that regardless of what my family thought, I had earned my place here, because I showed up every day for 12 years, for kids who had no one else. Before I describe the moment a man I once knew as a broken boy walked onto that stage and changed the room forever, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you believe that a teacher's impact cannot be measured in a paycheck. If you are watching right now, please drop a comment letting me know where you are from and what time it is there. I want to know who is witnessing this journey with me. Have you ever had a teacher who saw something in you that you did not see in yourself? Tell me about them in the comments. Now, let us go back to the moment the secretary said, "Please welcome Marcus Thompson." My heart stopped. Marcus, little Marcus Thompson, who used to sit in the back of my classroom with holes in his shoes and hunger in his eyes. He was the boy who turned in assignments written on napkins because he could not afford notebooks. The boy who once told me he would probably be dead by 20. But the man walking toward the microphone was not little anymore. Marcus Thompson stood 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, in a perfectly tailored suit with a Johns Hopkins ID badge hanging from his pocket. At 28, he was a second-year resident in pediatric surgery. When I was 16, I was homeless. Marcus began, his voice steady. The audience fell silent. He told them his mother was in prison, he was sleeping in his car, and he had given up on everything: school, life, and himself. Then he walked into my English class. He told the 2,000 people in that room that I noticed things others ignored, that he was always hungry, that he wore the same clothes every day, and that he flinched when people moved too fast. His voice cracked slightly as he explained that I never made him feel like a charity case. I bought him food, drove him to scholarship interviews, and stayed after school for hours helping him with college applications. When he got into Johns Hopkins, I was the first person he called. He said it was not because I was his teacher, but because I was thus the first adult who ever believed he could be something. Marcus wiped his eyes and looked directly toward the side of the stage where I was standing. He said I did not save his life with big gestures. I saved it with small acts of kindness every single day. I am a doctor today because of her, he finished. The audience rose to their feet as one. 2,000 people stood applauding, a thunderous sound that echoed off the high ceilings. I felt tears building, the heavy ache of my family's rejection finally being washed away by the weight of Marcus's words. While my father and sister were sitting in a French restaurant in Philadelphia, mocking my lowly teacher's award and assuming I was in a high school gym with a paper certificate, the entire nation was watching a successful surgeon credit his life to my work. The Secretary of Education returned to the podium with a cream envelope in his hands. He noted that the committee had reviewed hundreds of nominations and that the 4 finalists represented the absolute best of American education. He broke the seal, and the room went deathly quiet. The 2024 National Teacher of the Year is Chloe Sterling from Boston, Massachusetts. The room exploded. I could not move until my fellow finalist, Priya, physically pushed me forward. The walk to that stage felt like a dream, lights blurring, applause thundering, and faces smiling. I was a teacher from an underfunded middle school who had simply refused to give up on her kids, and now 2,000 strangers were celebrating me. As the secretary shook my hand, I spotted Marcus in the crowd. He was crying openly, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt, and he mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." I looked out at Grandma Beatrice in the front row. She was sobbing joyfully, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. At the bottom of the television screens across America, a CNN breaking news banner appeared. Boston teacher Chloe Sterling named National Teacher of the Year. My family back in that restaurant had just ordered dessert, completely unaware that their lives were about to be turned upside down by a truth they had tried so hard to ignore. Some truths are indeed better discovered on a screen than explained at a dinner table. And for Harrison, Evelyn, and Madison, the lesson was just beginning. The applause for Marcus Thompson was not just a sound. It was a physical force that shook the grand ballroom of the Kennedy Center. 2,000 people were on their feet, many of them wiping away tears after hearing how a homeless boy became a pediatric surgeon because one teacher refused to give up on him. I stood in the wings, my hands trembling so violently that I had to lace my fingers together. Through a gap in the heavy velvet curtain, I saw Grandma Beatrice in the front row. She wasn't clapping. She was just nodding slowly, her eyes fixed on the stage with a look of absolute, unshakable certainty. The Secretary of Education returned to the podium, his expression solemn, as he held a thick, cream-colored envelope. He spoke about the hundreds of nominations and how the 4 finalists represented the absolute best of the American spirit. I felt a sudden, sharp memory of my father, Harrison, laughing at my little teacher appreciation thing just days before. The contrast was so loud, it was deafening. The secretary broke the seal, the paper crinkling into the silence of the room. The 2024 National Teacher of the Year is Chloe Sterling from Boston, Massachusetts. Before I tell you about the speech that changed my life and the moment my family finally saw the truth on national television, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you believe that a person's worth is more than their bank account, hit that subscribe button right now. I also want to hear from you in the comments. Where are you watching from and what time is it there? Most importantly, have you ever achieved something great after being told you would never amount to anything? I read every single comment, and your stories of resilience are what keep me going. Now, let us get back to that stage in Washington, D.C. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. It was as if my feet were anchored to the floorboards. It was only when my fellow finalist, Priya, laughed through her tears and physically pushed me forward that I realized I had to walk out there. The walk to the podium felt like a dream. The lights were blurring, the applause was thundering, and every face I passed was smiling with genuine respect. These were university presidents, governors, and legendary educators, and they were all standing for me. As the secretary shook my hand and handed me a crystal trophy so beautiful I was afraid to hold it, I spotted Marcus in the crowd. He was crying openly, clapping so hard his hands must have been raw, and he mouthed two words, "Thank you." I stepped up to the microphone, looking out at the sea of people and the bright red tally lights of the CNN and C-SPAN cameras that were broadcasting my face to millions of homes across the country. I had a safe speech prepared, full of statistics about education funding and polite thank yous. But as I looked at the teleprompter, I realized I couldn't say any of it. I thought about the dinner table in Boston, the fine china, the crystal decanter, and my father's voice calling my career lowly. I thought about my sister Madison, mocking my economy flight and my sad apartment. Growing up, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. I was told that teaching was not a real career. The audience shifted, sensing that this was not going to be a standard gratitude speech. I was told I was wasting my potential, that I would never amount to anything, and that success meant seven-figure salaries and corporate titles. I paused, letting the weight of those words hang in the air. I was told that teachers were just people who couldn't make it anywhere else. The room was deathly quiet now. I found Grandma Beatrice's eyes in the front row. She was the one who had spent 30 years as a legendary principal, the one who had secretly nominated me because she knew I wasn't ready to find my voice until now. But tonight, I stand here because of one person who never stopped believing in me, I said, as the cameras swung toward her. Grandma, you taught me something my parents never could, that success isn't measured by salary or status. It is measured by the lives you touch, the students you lift up, and the seeds you plant that bloom long after you are gone. I looked directly into the main camera lens, knowing that 300 miles away in a French restaurant, my family was likely staring at a television screen. To every teacher watching tonight, I continued, your work matters. Your sacrifice matters. Your students will remember you long after they forget the facts you taught them. They will remember how you made them feel. And to anyone who has ever been told they weren't enough, your worth isn't determined by the people who refuse to see it. Find the people who do, hold on to them, and never ever apologize for following your heart. The standing ovation that followed lasted 3 full minutes. I never mentioned Harrison, Evelyn, or Madison by name. I didn't have to. Everyone watching that broadcast knew exactly who wasn't there. I stood there clutching my trophy, feeling a sense of peace that no bonus or promotion could ever buy. I was no longer the lowly teacher or the family afterthought. I was the 2024 National Teacher of the Year, and I had finally learned that the only approval I ever needed was my own. As I walked off that stage, my phone in my clutch began to buzz incessantly with notifications. But for the first time in 32 years, I didn't feel the urge to check it. The truth had been delivered, and the lesson was just beginning for those left behind in the shadows. While I was standing in the golden light of the Kennedy Center, finally feeling the weight of that crystal trophy in my hands, 300 miles away in Philadelphia, the Sterling family was busy celebrating a real achievement. They had gathered at the Park Brasserie, an elite French restaurant on Rittenhouse Square where the white tablecloths are ironed twice and the wine list starts at 3 figures. My father, Arthur, had ordered a bottle of Dom Perignon chilling in a silver bucket, his face glowing with the kind of pride he only reserved for my sister, Madison. He raised his glass to her, celebrating her new partnership at the firm, while completely dismissing the ceremony he had called nonsense just days before. Madison smiled, basking in the attention, as they joked about my little trophy presentation taking place in some dusty conference room with finger sandwiches and a PowerPoint. They were so convinced of my insignificance that they did not even notice the shift in the air around them. Before I describe the moment my father's phone buzzed with a notification that turned his face as white as the linens on the table, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy seeing justice served. If you are watching right now, please drop a comment letting me know where you are from and what time it is there. Have you ever had a moment where the truth came out in the most public way possible? I want to hear about your experiences in the comments because knowing we are not alone helps us heal. Now let us go back to that dinner table in Philadelphia. Arthur reached for his phone, a habit of staying connected to the world that mattered to him, the world of stocks, mergers, and high-stakes news. A CNN notification sat at the top of his screen. Breaking, Philadelphia teacher wins prestigious national award. He almost scrolled past it, thinking it was just another local news fluff piece. But then he saw the photo. His hand froze. The image showed a woman on a massive stage shaking hands with a man in a dark suit. Behind them, a screen the size of a house displayed the words, National Teacher of the Year 2024. The woman was me. Arthur? My mother, Eleanor, asked, noticing his sudden silence. Is it bad news from the market? He could not speak. He simply held out the phone with a trembling hand. Eleanor took it, squinting at the screen, and her face went pale. That is Grace, she whispered. Madison grabbed the phone, her wine glass tipping over and spreading red liquid across the white tablecloth like a stain they could not wash away. No, that cannot be, she stammered. She said it was just a small ceremony. But the Secretary of Education was right there on the screen, and the CNN banner was flashing my name in bold letters for the entire country to see. Then, they saw the video clip of Marcus Thompson. They watched as a 6-foot-tall pediatric surgeon stood at a microphone with tears streaming down his face, telling the world that I was the reason he was alive. Miss Sterling did not save my life with big gestures. Marcus said to the millions of viewers, she saved it with small acts of kindness every single day. The restaurant continued to hum with laughter and music around them, but at the Sterling table, there was only a suffocating silence. Mark, Madison's husband, leaned over to look at the screen, his expression unreadable, as he realized the lowly teacher they had mocked was being celebrated by the highest officials in the land. The judgment did not just come from the screen. A woman at a nearby table, who had been watching the broadcast on her own device, noticed the phone in Eleanor's hand. She leaned over, her face full of excitement. Excuse me, I could not help but notice. Are you Grace Sterling's family? She asked. I just saw her win on TV. You must be so proud. My father attempted a forced smile, muttering that they were very proud. The woman's expression shifted instantly. Wait, she asked, why are you not at the ceremony? Washington is not that far. My mother fumbled for an excuse about flights, but the woman frowned. It is a 3-hour drive, she noted quietly. Oh, I see. She walked away without another word, her silence speaking volumes of the pity and judgment she felt for them. The Sterling family sat in their expensive restaurant, surrounded by witnesses to their absence. Madison tried to regain control, her fingers flying across her phone screen to post a fake congratulatory message on social media, claiming family always comes first. She added a photo of me from the broadcast, hoping to spin the narrative before her friends could ask questions. But she had forgotten about the lunch she had earlier that day. Joanna Price, a lawyer who had once been an education reporter, was already typing a response that would go viral within minutes. Funny, Joanna commented publicly, at lunch today, you called it just a teacher appreciation thing and said teaching was not a real career. What changed? The post exploded. Other women from that lunch liked the comment, confirming that Madison's words had been uncomfortable to witness. Madison's blood ran cold as she realized her reputation as a supportive sister was being dismantled in real time. Her phone buzzed with a text from a senior partner at her firm asking about the social media situation. The education nonprofit her firm represented had seen the posts, and they were not happy. The dirt was finally falling on the narrative they had built against me. While I was in Washington being embraced by my grandmother and my former student, my family was realizing that reputation isn't about what you say when people are watching. It is about who you are when you think no one is. They had spent 32 years making me feel small. But that night, the world made them feel smaller than they ever thought possible. The truth was not just delivered, it was broadcast. And for the first time in my life, I was not the one who had to apologize for taking up space. While the flashbulbs were still popping in Washington, and I was being ushered into a private reception with the Secretary of Education, my sister Madison was locked in the marble-tiled restroom of the Park Brasserie, her hands shaking as she gripped her phone. The lowly teacher she had mocked just days ago was now the most famous educator in America, and Madison could feel her carefully constructed reputation as a supportive, high-achieving sister beginning to crack under the weight of the national spotlight. She needed to control the narrative. She needed to spin this before the world realized she had chosen a bottle of champagne over her own sister's crowning moment. With a practiced flick of her thumb, she posted a screenshot of me on stage, adding a caption filled with heart emojis. "So proud of my amazing little sister Grace. Wish we could have been there tonight, but family always comes first. National Teacher of the Year, proud sister." She exhaled, leaning against the cold vanity, believing she had managed the crisis. But Madison had forgotten one crucial detail. The internet never forgets, and neither do the people you insult on your way to the top. Within seconds, a comment appeared that made her blood run cold. It was from Joanna Price, the lawyer from lunch. The one Madison had forgotten was once an education reporter. Joanna's comment was short and devastating. "Funny. At lunch today, you called this just a teacher appreciation thing and said teaching wasn't a real career. What changed, Madison?" Before I tell you how that single comment ignited a firestorm that cost Madison the biggest case of her career, and how my parents became the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you believe that the truth eventually finds its way into the light, hit that subscribe button right now. I also want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever seen someone try to take credit for your success after they doubted you? Tell me where you are watching from and your story of setting the record straight. I read every single comment, and your support is what helps me share these truths. Now, let us look at the fallout that followed the Sterling family back to Philadelphia. Joanna Price didn't stop at one comment. She provided receipts, quoting Madison's exact words about my $50,000 salary and classrooms full of other people's children. The post exploded. Other women who had been at that lunch began to like the comment, one even adding that the conversation had been uncomfortable to witness. By the time Madison returned to the table, her phone was a weapon of mass destruction. Screenshots of her hypocrisy were already circulating on legal Twitter and local blogs. The perfect lawyer persona was being dismantled in real time by the very people she had tried to impress. The professional consequences arrived the following Monday. Madison was called into her supervising partner's office. He didn't mention the social media post directly. He didn't have to. He simply informed her that she was being quietly removed from the firm's most prestigious pro bono case, an education nonprofit. "It's not a punishment," he said with a cold, professional smile. "It's optics. The client specifically requested a different attorney after the recent publicity." Her path to equity partner wasn't blocked, but it was now covered in the dirt she had dug for herself. She realized then that reputation isn't about what you say when the cameras are on. It's about who people believe you are when you think no one is watching. My parents, Arthur and Eleanor, fared no better. They returned to their quiet, manicured suburb, expecting the world to remain the same, but the world had seen the broadcast. They had seen me thank only my grandmother, Beatrice, and they had noticed the 2 empty chairs where my parents should have been. At his regular Tuesday golf game, Arthur found himself the target of the very men he respected. Frank Morrison, a man he had known for 30 years, called out as he adjusted his glove. "How's our celebrity father doing? I heard you missed the ceremony because you were too busy eating French food." The other men laughed, not with Arthur, but at him. Eleanor faced a similar judgment at her Thursday book club. The women, who normally discussed the latest bestseller, spent 20 minutes dissecting my speech instead. Margaret Sullivan leaned in, her eyes sharp. "That line about finding people who believe in you, so beautiful. Were you there when she said it, Eleanor?" My mother fumbled, repeating the lie about flights, but Helen Moore just laughed. "Eleanor, you can drive to D.C. in 3 hours. Arthur drives to New York for golf tournaments every month." The silence that followed was louder than any insult. The women exchanged glances that communicated volumes. They knew the truth. They knew my parents had chosen to stay home because they didn't think I was worth the trip. The Sterling family sat in their beautiful colonial home, surrounded by the high-end furniture and the fine china they had used to measure their worth. But for the first time, it felt empty. They had spent 32 years making me feel like an afterthought, but now they were the ones being dismissed. My father's phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from distant relatives asking why he wasn't on CNN with me. My mother stopped going to the grocery store to avoid the pitying looks from neighbors. While they were drowning in the consequences of their choices, I was sitting in my suite at the Willard, finally at peace. I had 47 missed calls from Arthur and 15 from Madison, but I didn't open a single one. I didn't need their sudden pride now that the whole country was watching. I realized that their shame wasn't my burden to carry. They had spent decades teaching me that my value depended on their approval, but they were wrong. I had built a life of meaning and purpose, and I had done it without them. The lowly teacher was now the one setting the terms, and the Sterling family was finally learning that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt with a simple, "I'm proud of you." 2 weeks after Washington, I agreed to meet my parents at their house. I did not go because I needed their approval or because I was seeking a place at their table. I went because I was finally ready to face the people who had spent 32 years trying to make me feel small. The colonial brick house looked the same as always, with its perfectly manicured lawn and the seasonal wreath on the front door. But as I walked up the driveway, I realized the house had not changed, but I had. I was no longer the daughter who adjusted her life around their opinions. I was Emily Carter, the National Teacher of the Year, and I had found my peace. When I walked through the door, my family was already seated in the living room like they were waiting for a court hearing. My father, Richard, sat in his usual armchair, while my mother, Diane, sat on the sofa twisting her hands in her lap. Victoria was perched on the edge of a cushion, looking as though she wanted to flee. No one stood to greet me. The silence was heavy, but it did not feel suffocating anymore. It just felt empty. Richard cleared his throat and said we needed to talk about what happened. I remained standing and asked him what exactly he meant. I told him it was quite simple. I won the most important award of my career. I invited my family to be there, and they laughed at me and went to a French restaurant instead. Diane started to cry, claiming they did not know it was such a big deal. I looked at her and reminded her that I had sent an invitation that clearly mentioned the Secretary of Education and a national broadcast. I looked at Victoria, who stood up abruptly and offered a sharp, superficial apology, asking if I was happy now. I told her that I did not want her apology. I told them all that for 32 years, I had tried to earn their respect and prove that my choices were valid, even if they were not the choices they would have made. I told them I was done trying. I was done being the family afterthought who showed up no matter how she was treated. Before I tell you about the new life I built and the letter my father sent me 6 months later, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you believe that your worth is not determined by the people who refuse to see it. If you are watching right now, please drop a comment below and share a moment when you finally chose yourself over someone else's expectations. Your stories help others find the strength to set their own boundaries. I read every single one of your comments, and I want to know where you are watching from today. Now, Let us see what happens when the lowly teacher finally starts living on her own terms. I told my parents that I was not cutting them out of my life, but I was giving myself boundaries. I told them I would attend family events when I was treated with respect, and I would visit when I was truly welcome, not just tolerated. Victoria rolled her eyes and called it ridiculous, but I met my father's eyes and told him he had spent 32 years teaching me that my worth depended on his approval, and it took me too long to learn he was wrong. I stepped outside into the cool autumn air, and as the door closed softly behind me, I did not look back. 6 months later, spring sunlight streamed through the windows of my new apartment, a 2-bedroom brownstone, twice the size of my old place. The award had come with prize money that provided a down payment on a real home. On my wall hung a framed photo from Washington of Grandma Martha and me, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Thompson. He had matched for pediatric surgery at Stanford. I sat with that feeling of pride and purpose, a satisfaction no 7-figure salary could ever buy. I had been invited to the White House, and as the president shook my hand in the Rose Garden, I wondered if my father was watching. Then a small cream-colored envelope arrived. I recognized my father's handwriting. I opened it slowly and read his words. "Emily, I was wrong about your career, about what matters, and about you. I do not expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I am sorry." I read it twice and set it down gently. 6 months ago, that letter would have meant everything to me. I would have rushed over to rebuild bridges that were never really there. But now I felt something different. I felt peace. I would respond eventually, but it would be on my terms, outside of their shadow. Looking back, this journey taught me that walking away is not always giving up. Sometimes it is the strongest thing you can do. Boundaries are not walls. They are bridges to healthier relationships. The best revenge is not something dramatic. It is simply living well, authentically, and on your own terms. I am Emily Carter, and I am no longer a lowly teacher. I am an educator, a mentor, and a woman who finally knows her own value. Thank you for staying until the end of my story. If you want to see how other people found the courage to stand up to toxic family dynamics, click the video on the screen now. I will see you in the next one.